I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. You wake up, you grab your coffee, and you check your phone, only to realize that, well, every digital anchor of your life has been quietly, surgically hijacked while you slept.
It's just a completely normal Tuesday morning, really.
Right, yeah. But seriously, imagine your highly sensitive tax data, your entire academic history, your university degrees, and even the proprietary unreleased designs of the sneakers you're wearing right now.
All of it just gone.
Exactly. All of it exfiltrated, encrypted, and held hostage simultaneously by, these unseen, decentralized actors scattered across global servers.
It sounds like the inciting incident of some cyberpunk novel.
It really does. But based on the 2026 threat matrix we are mapping out today, it is just standard reality. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So today we are dissecting the rapidly evolving cyber threat landscape. We're extracting the raw intelligence from a fascinating stack of early 2026 Spanish radio transcripts.
And there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, totally. We're looking at the convergence of three critical battlegrounds. First, the gathering of the ethical hacker community at RutedCon 2026. Then, the terrifying mechanics behind these alleged massive data breaches hitting the Spanish Ministries and even Nike.
And finally, the automated AI security wars, which were mapped out by Panda Security's Hervé Lambert in these sources.
Right. And I want to be clear right up front, we are not treating cybersecurity as some dry back-office IT compliance issue today.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we're looking at a high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar arms race where the board is just, expanding every single second.
And the pieces on that board are becoming entirely autonomous, which is wild.
Yeah, that autonomy is, it's the variable that changes the entire equation. I mean, the era of the lone wolf attacker sitting in a dark hoodie, manually guessing passwords, that's effectively dead.
Right, like the Hollywood hacker trope.
Exactly. We're looking at an ecosystem dominated by automated syndicates. They operate with the organizational efficiency of, Fortune 500 companies.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. They have initial access brokers, specialized malware developers, and even dedicated negotiation teams for when they hold your data hostage.
That's terrifying. So when we analyze this 2026 landscape, we really have to look past the surface-level panic of a data breach.
Yes. You have to examine the underlying economics, the automated code structures, and critically, the psychological blind spots that allow these compromises to happen at such a massive scale.
So let's start with the people actually trying to map those blind spots before the syndicates do. The transcripts detail this massive gathering of the ethical hacker community at RutedCon 2026.
Right. Spain's premier cybersecurity and technology congress.
Exactly. We're looking at their 16th edition, which runs from March 5th to the 7th at Canépolis in Madrid. And they have these intensive, highly specialized training sessions happening the 3 days prior at the Hotel Eurostars.
Yeah, and the historical context of the 16th edition is super critical. I mean, the 2025 event was their 15-year anniversary.
Which in the technology sector is practically a geological epoch, right?
It really is. Surviving and remaining relevant for 15 years in cybersecurity means they've successfully pivoted through multiple, entirely different generations of threat vectors.
Like, going from what?
Well, from the early days of basic script kiddies just messing around to the modern era of state-sponsored, advanced, persistent threats. And now, looking toward a 25-year horizon, they've entirely restructured their focus.
Right. The transcripts mention the integration of a dedicated artificial intelligence track, which they actually initiated back in 2025.
Yeah, and that reflects the reality that AI is no longer just some theoretical tool. It is the primary weapon of choice on both sides.
And I noticed their integration with highly specialized niche community groups like ProTap, Crypto, and Securitors.
Which indicates a massive move toward hyper-specialization.
Yeah.
I mean, a single security analyst can no longer understand the entire threat landscape.
It's just too vast.
Exactly. Defense now requires a coalition of micro-experts.
You know, what really stands out to me in these transcripts is the paradox of their operational reality. Well, we are talking about a community that lives entirely in the digital ether, right? They analyze code and virtual architectures all day, yet they heavily prioritize physical face-to-face connection.
Oh, absolutely. The human element.
Yeah. I mean, the pre-event buzz is driven by these virtual badges, but the absolute focal point seems to be the informal networking, like the open bar that starts after 8 p.m.
The famous open bar.
Right. So my question is, in a sector defined by remote work and zero-trust architectures, Why is analog socializing the linchpin of digital defense?
That's a great question. It's because the fundamental currency of cybersecurity is not code, it is trust.
Trust. Okay, explain that.
Well, we are talking about an industry where professionals are dealing with highly sensitive vulnerabilities, zero-day exploits.
Things that aren't public yet.
Exactly. Things that, if leaked to the wrong forum, could cripple financial institutions or power grids within hours. You cannot share that level of threat intelligence on an encrypted Slack channel with someone you only know by an anonymous pseudonym.
Oh, I see. You need to actually know the person on the other end of the line.
Precisely. When an analyst discovers a novel mutation in ransomware, they need to discreetly warn their counterparts at, say, other telecommunications companies or banks.
Before it hits the news.
Right. And the informal networks forged at that open bar where you look someone in the eye, understand their methodology, and verify their operational integrity. That translates directly to high-speed threat intelligence sharing when a crisis actually hits.
So you are basically building analog trust networks to secure digital infrastructure.
That's exactly it.
It's like human networking functioning as the ultimate zero-trust bypass. And this community enforces that trust through deep, almost tribal lore, which I find fascinating.
Yes, the riddles.
Yes. Getting a ticket to RutedCon through the radio show's giveaway mechanism isn't just some random lottery. It's a literal test of community integration.
They use these historical riddles that only insiders would really know.
Right. The first one, presented by Roman Ramirez, asked for the location of the first formal Hack the Music action.
And the answer to that was El Sotano, the basement.
The basement. Which is more than just trivia, right? It feels like a cultural anchor.
Oh, absolutely. It reminds of a multi-million-dollar, highly corporatized industry of its literal roots. I mean, this industry didn't start in glass-walled corporate security operations centers.
It started in basements.
Yeah, driven by pure curiosity and a desire to just dismantle and understand how systems work.
But the second riddle carries a different kind of weight, I think. Arancha Sanz, the president of RutedCon, asked this unresolved question in the transcripts.
Right, about the Raoul Jover Award.
Yeah. Who was the person or organization that received the first Raoul Jover Award? And the transcripts explicitly note the emotional resonance of this.
Because Raoul Jover wasn't just a pioneer. He was a deeply beloved friend of the community.
And that emotional resonance really humanizes the abstract nature of cyber defense, doesn't it?
It does. When we look at the daily deluge of automated attacks and algorithmic defenses, it is so easy to forget the sheer psychological toll on the actual defenders.
The burnout must be insane.
Burnout in the cybersecurity sector is astronomically high. I mean, think about it. Analysts are expected to be perfect 100% of the time.
While an attacker only needs to get lucky once.
Exactly. So gathering to honor figures like Raoul Jover, it builds the psychological resilience necessary to sustain a career in an environment defined by constant, invisible warfare.
Because they're defending a society that largely does not understand the technical sacrifices being made behind the scenes.
Most people have no idea.
Well, that localized, deep-seated trust mechanism at RutedCon is exactly what seems to be missing when we scale up to the massive architectures of state systems.
Yes. The public sector panic.
Right. Which brings us to the massive blind spots in the Spanish government infrastructure. The transcripts detail these catastrophic alerts published by Hackbank, which is a dark web monitoring platform.
And these alerts were huge.
Massive. We are looking at a supposed breach of the Spanish Ministry of Finance, Hacienda, claiming the exposure of the data of 47 million citizens.
Basically the entire population.
Yeah. We're talking full names, national IDs, physical addresses, emails, bank accounts, and highly granular tax information.
If that were validated, a breach of that magnitude would instantly compromise the foundational identity verification systems of the entire state.
Because everything relies on that data.
Everything.
Yeah.
Every single banking security question, every tax portal, every mortgage application relies on the secrecy of that specific data set.
Okay, but let me pump the brakes here for a second, because the transcripts are very careful to note that this is unconfirmed.
Yes, very important distinction.
The ministry is actively investigating, but the data hasn't been verified as authentic. So my question to you is, if a threat actor hasn't actually breached Hacienda, what is the economic driver for loudly and publicly claiming they have the data of 47 million people?
Like, why bluff?
Yeah. If it's a bluff, how does a bluff make money?
Well, the bluff makes money by exploiting the structure of dark web broker markets and also just basic human psychology. There are two distinct revenue streams for a fabricated mega breach.
Okay, walk me through the first one.
The first is the direct dark web hustle. Threat actors operate on these hidden forums where reputation is theoretically everything, but the anonymity allows for massive exit scams.
So they just lie to other criminals.
Basically, yeah. A group might take older, smaller, previously leaked databases from various third-party vendors. Then they use an AI tool to merge, format, and synthesize all that old data to make it look like a fresh, cohesive pull from the Ministry of Finance.
Oh, wow. So it looks real at first glance.
Yeah, okay. Then they put it up for sale to the highest bidder, demanding payment in, Monero or Bitcoin.
Everyone buys it.
Oh, yeah. A rival criminal syndicate, eager to exploit the data for identity theft, pays a massive sum. But by the time the buyer analyzes the data set and realizes it's just a stitched-together Frankenstein of old data...
The seller is gone.
Right. The seller has moved the cryptocurrency through a series of tumblers and completely vanished. You're dealing with criminals. There's no customer service refund policy.
It's the digital equivalent of selling a fake painting to a rival art thief. I mean, they can't exactly go to the police and complain they were defrauded.
Precisely. It's a perfect crime in a lawless ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
But the second revenue stream is the one that directly impacts the listener.
What's that?
The webitization of the news cycle.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. The threat actors know the media will run with the headline, 47 million tax records stolen. They literally rely on it.
Because it generates clicks.
And panic. The moment that headline hits the mainstream news cycle, millions of citizens experience a massive spike in anxiety. And simultaneously, the attackers launch massive automated phishing campaigns via SMS and email.
So you're sitting at home, you see the news, and your phone buzzes.
Exactly. And the message looks perfectly official, complete with ministry logos. It says, "Urgent, your tax data may be compromised. Click this link immediately to verify your identity and secure your tax return."
So they engineer the panic through the media, knowing that a panic brain completely bypasses critical thinking.
Yes. The citizen is so desperate to confirm they are safe that they willingly type their real, actual credentials into a spoofed website.
Wow. They create a phantom disease so they can sell a poisoned cure.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this tactic relies heavily on historical amnesia.
What do you mean?
Well, the transcripts point out that similar rumors of massive hacienda hacks have circulated before.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The public panicked, the government launched investigations, and the reality turned out to be a breach of a single small gestoria.
Yeah.
Like a local tax agency that had terrible security practices.
Ah, so the data of a few thousand clients was leaked, not millions.
Right. But the attackers exploit the ambiguity between a massive central breach and a localized vendor compromise to generate maximum terror and get people to click those links.
Which is why you have to view breach headlines with extreme caution. Okay, so the Ministry of Finance might be a masterclass in psychological manipulation.
Or we just smoke and mirrors, yeah.
But the HackMech alerts detail a second attack, this time on the Ministry of Science and Innovation, and this one looks entirely real.
Yes, and this one exposes a terrifyingly simple systemic flaw.
Right. This breach allegedly hit personal and academic data, university degrees, certificates, tuition payment plans, and the actual IBANs used for university fees.
Highly sensitive stuff.
And the technical mechanism blamed for this is an IDOR vulnerability, IDOR, Insecure Direct Object Reference.
IDOR is the silent killer of web applications. I mean, it really is. To understand why it's so devastating, we have to look at the underlying architecture of how modern web portals actually communicate with databases.
Well, let's ground this in physical reality first, because the tech jargon can get heavy. I've heard IDOR described like a coat check.
Okay, I like that analogy. Let's hear it.
So imagine you go to a fancy restaurant, you give them your coat, and they hand you claim ticket number 12.
Right.
Later, you want your coat back. But instead of handing them ticket 12, you take a pen, scribble out the 12, write 13, and hand it to the attendant.
And what does the attendant do?
The attendant looks at the ticket, sees 13, walks to the back, and just hands you someone else's much more expensive coat. They completely fail to verify if the face of the person holding the ticket actually matches the face of the person who originally dropped off coat 13.
That analogy holds up perfectly. In a digital environment, the coat check attendant is the API, the application programming interface.
Okay, so how does that look on my screen?
When a citizen logs into the Ministry of Science portal to check their tuition status, the browser sends a request to the server. The URL at the top might look something like ministry.esapirkerd 4592.
Right, 4592 is my specific account.
Exactly. The IDOR vulnerability occurs when the API is programmed to fetch the record for user 4592, but it completely lacks the secondary authorization check to ensure that the person actually making the request is authorized to see user 4592's data.
So the attacker doesn't need to break any encryption?
Nope.
They don't need to steal passwords, and they don't need to deploy malware?
Not at all.
They just log into their own legitimate account, go to the URL bar, change 492 to 44593, hit enter, and the server blindly hands over the next citizen's data.
It is exactly that simple.
That's insane.
It becomes catastrophic when you combine it with automation.
Because they aren't typing this in by hand.
No, of course not. The attacker writes a simple Python script that just iterates through numbers, 4594, 4595, 4596, sending thousands of requests per second.
Wow.
And if the system uses sequential numbers, or worse, as the transcript suggests for this case, the actual national ID numbers, the DNI.
Then the attacker already knows the exact sequence to type in.
Exactly. They can systematically scrape the entire national database over a single weekend.
But wait, how does a vulnerability that simple exist in a state-level system? I mean, the transcripts mention the National Cryptologic Center, the CCN. These systems undergo rigorous, highly regulated security audits, right?
They do, yes.
So how does a multi-million-dollar infrastructure get bypassed by literally just changing a number in a URL?
Because of the temporal gap in modern software development.
The temporal gap. What's that?
Well, the CCN might audit the entire architecture in January, right?
Yeah.
They test it, and they certify it as completely secure.
Okay, so in January, it's safe.
Right. But modern web development relies on something called CI/CD, continuous integration, and continuous deployment.
Meaning they're always updating the website.
Constantly. Development teams are pushing minor updates, bug fixes, and new features to the live site every single week.
Oh, I see.
So in March, a junior developer might push a minor update to the user dashboard. And in doing so, they accidentally strip out the authorization check on that specific API endpoint.
Just a tiny human error.
Just a few lines of code missing. But suddenly, the system is wide open. And the kicker, the next CCN audit isn't scheduled until the following January.
Oh my God, so for 9 months, the data is entirely exposed.
Exactly. Security compliance is just a snapshot in time, but cyber defense needs to be a continuous state.
Which perfectly transitions us into the private sector. Because those exact same temporal gaps and human errors exist there, but the target is entirely different.
Much different, yes.
We are looking at this massive data leak hitting Nike. 1.4 terabytes of data across more than 188,000 files.
That is a staggering amount of data.
It is. But the crucial distinction here, this wasn't a database of customer credit cards or passwords. This was a theft of strategy.
Check exfiltration.
Yeah. They stole internal designs, product development roadmaps, and manufacturing plans. So my question is, we always hear about hackers stealing identities to commit fraud. But if you steal a shoe design, what's the play?
Right. How do you cash out?
Exactly. You can't exactly walk into a bank and cash a blueprint for a sneaker. How do attackers monetize a roadmap?
Well, we are witnessing a massive evolution in the attacker's business model. This is all about destroying competitive advantage through corporate extortion.
Extortion.
Yeah. 5 years ago, ransomware groups focused almost entirely on encryption. They would lock a hospital's computers and demand a ransom for the key to unlock them.
Right, the classic hostage situation.
But organizations got smarter. They started keeping immutable offline backups. They realized, hey, we don't need to pay the ransom because we can just wipe our systems and restore from yesterday's backup.
So the attackers lost their leverage.
Exactly. So they pivoted from encryption to exfiltration.
It shifts from a hostage situation to a blackmail situation.
Precisely. And the buyers for this kind of strategic intellectual property are twofold.
Okay, who's the first buyer?
First, you have the massive, highly organized counterfeit syndicates. These groups often operate with tacit state backing in regions with really lax intellectual property laws.
So they just make fake shoes.
But on an industrial scale,
Yeah.
if they acquire Nike's 2027 blueprints in early 2026, they can manufacture visually identical, low-quality knockoffs and flood the global market before Nike even launches the real product.
Which completely neutralizes the billions Nike spent on R&D and marketing.
Exactly. It guts the product launch entirely.
Okay, and who is the second buyer?
Or rival corporation.
Really? Like a direct competitor?
Well, a legitimate multinational won't buy stolen data directly off a dark web forum, obviously. But the intelligence can be funneled through opaque corporate espionage channels to counter Nike's strategic moves.
Wow!
And the threat actor knows this. They take this 1.4 terabytes of highly valuable proprietary leverage, and they bypass the IT department entirely.
Where do they go?
They go straight to the executive board. The negotiation is no longer pay us to unlock your computers. The computers are running just fine.
So what's the threat?
The threat is pay us $50 million in cryptocurrency, or we leak your entire 2027 product line to your competitors and the counterfeiters right now.
It's corporate extortion on a macroeconomic scale.
Yes. The transcripts make a great analogy here. They say it's like stealing the formula for Coca-Cola. Or they bring up how the proprietary blueprints for the U.S. F-35 stealth fighter were compromised.
Oh, right. And then suddenly there's the Chinese J-35 fighter jet, which looked remarkably similar.
Exactly. The target is the organization's unique competitive advantage. Once that's gone, the company's valuation tanks.
You know, I want the listener to really think about their own workplace for a second. We are so conditioned to protect customer data, locking down the CRM, securing the payment gateways.
Because of regulations, mostly.
Right. But the threat actors have realized that the internal memos outlining a potential merger, the source code of an unreleased app, or the logistical shipping routes of raw materials, that stuff is infinitely more valuable for direct extortion.
Oh, absolutely. And extracting that intellectual property requires a level of network penetration that goes way beyond just clicking a bad link.
We mean?
To find 1.4 terabytes of highly specific strategic files, the attackers must dwell inside the corporate network for months.
Just silently watching.
Yes. Mapping the internal servers, observing which executives access which folders, and slowly siphoning the data out in tiny bursts so they don't trigger any data loss prevention alarms.
Which is terrifying. And this shift from simple data theft to complex corporate extortion isn't happening in a vacuum, is it?
Not at all.
It's part of a massive acceleration in cyber capabilities projected for 2026, largely driven by one specific technology.
Artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And the transcripts lay out this 2026 threat matrix through the analysis of Hervé Lambert. He's the Global Consumer Operations Manager at Panda Security.
And his insights are incredibly sobering.
Very. He sets the stage by saying attacks are becoming less visible, but much more intelligent. We have essentially entered the era of the automated, AI-driven security war.
Yes. Lambert's analysis deconstructs how AI has fundamentally democratized advanced attack capabilities.
Let's break down the specific trends he identifies in the attacker's arsenal, starting with AI-powered phishing.
Okay, so historically, mass phishing campaigns were pretty recognizable, right?
Yeah, they were written by non-native speakers, riddled with bad grammar, weird formatting.
Exactly. And the defense against that was largely based on user awareness, just training employees to spot the bad grammar and hit delete.
But with large language models, I'm assuming that defense is completely obsolete.
Entirely obsolete. Threat actors are now utilizing jailbroken, highly customized LLMs specifically trained on corporate communications.
How does that work in practice?
Well, these models can scrape an executive's LinkedIn profile, their public speaking engagements on YouTube, and their previously leaked emails from other breaches.
So it learns how they sound.
Perfectly. The AI then synthesizes a highly localized, linguistically flawless email that mimics the executive's exact cadence, their favorite vocabulary, and their specific tone.
So there's no bad grammar to spot.
None. And it can generate thousands of these hyper-personalized spear phishing emails per minute. The attacker doesn't even need to speak English or Spanish. The AI acts as a master linguist.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
But Lambert emphasizes that this synthetic generation isn't limited to text, which brings us to digital fraud and synthetic data.
Right, the rise of deepfakes.
We're talking audio and video used to impersonate CEOs, employees, or even family members.
The architecture behind this involves Jan's generative adversarial networks. And the scary part is how little data they need now. With just 3 seconds of audio scraped from a podcast or a corporate presentation, these networks can clone a voice with terrifying accuracy.
Including, like, breath patterns and accents.
Yes, regional accents, pauses, everything.
Mm-hmm.
We are already seeing scenarios where a finance employee receives a frantic phone call from the CEO, utilizing a cloned voice, ordering an immediate untraceable wire transfer.
To secure a confidential merger or something.
Exactly.
But if the video of the CEO on the Zoom call is synthetic, and the voice on the phone is synthetic, and the email is grammatically flawless,
Yeah.
how does a human employee verify reality?
They can't. The fundamental mechanism of human trust is completely shattered.
And it sounds like attackers have gone from using a battering ram at the front gate to, sending in a swarm of microscopic drones that already know the exact layout of the castle.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And it gets worse when we look at the code itself.
Right. Polymorphic malware. What exactly is that?
Well, traditional antivirus software functions largely like a digital bouncer at a club, checking IDs against a list of known criminals. It looks for signatures, specific hashes, or recognizable patterns of code.
Okay, so if the code matches the list, it gets blocked.
Right. But polymorphic malware, guided by AI, acts like a criminal who changes their face, their fingerprints, and their DNA every 5 seconds while walking past that bouncer.
Oh, wow.
The AI engine rewrites the malware's underlying code structure continuously while maintaining its actual malicious function. By the time a traditional security system identifies the signature, the malware has already mutated into an entirely unrecognizable form.
So traditional antivirus is essentially useless against it.
More or less, yes. It evades static defense mechanisms effortlessly.
And when those internal defenses do somehow hold up, the attackers just change the battlefield entirely. Which brings us to Lambert's warning about supply chain attacks.
This is perhaps the most asymmetrical threat on the board right now.
Why is that? I mean, why attack a massive, heavily defended corporation directly when you can just hack their small, less defended vendor?
Exactly. It's the digital equivalent of breaching a heavily fortified castle by poisoning the water supply miles upstream.
Right.
A multinational corporation might spend hundreds of millions on state-of-the-art security. Their perimeter is impenetrable. But that corporation relies on a massive ecosystem of third-party vendors.
Like a small software company that handles their HR payroll.
Or a boutique marketing agency that manages their social media analytics.
So the attacker ignores the massive corporate firewall completely.
Right. They target the boutique marketing agency, which maybe has one overworked IT guy and a tiny budget. They breach the agency, inject malicious code into a standard software update, and then wait.
Wait for what?
For the agency to send that update to the multinational corporation. The corporation trusts the vendor, so they blindly install it, effectively opening the gates from the inside.
It's the ultimate Trojan horse.
Exactly. But, and this is important, Lambert is clear that the defense industry is not just sitting there taking this. The good guys are fighting back with their own AI.
Right. It's not totally hopeless. The transcripts mention a barrage of defensive acronyms here. XDR, SASE, SOC as a service. Can we break down the actual mechanics of how these systems fight back against polymorphic malware?
Let's start with XDR. It stands for Extended Detection and Response.
Okay.
Traditional security was very siloed. The email filter didn't talk to the laptop antivirus, and neither of them talked to the cloud firewall.
They were all isolated.
Right. XDR is an AI correlation engine. It ingests millions of data points across the entire network simultaneously.
So it sees the big picture.
Yes. And it doesn't look for known bad signatures, because as we established, those change. It looks for anomalous behavior.
Give me an example.
If an employee's laptop suddenly connects to an IP address in a foreign country at 3 a.m. and begins zipping thousands of PDF files.
That's obviously suspicious.
Right. The XDR's AI recognizes that behavioral pattern of exfiltration and can autonomously sever the laptop's network connection in milliseconds.
Isolating the infected device from the network instantly.
Exactly. Isolating the threat before human intervention is even possible.
Okay, that makes sense. But the transcripts also heavily emphasize SASE. S-A-S-E, Secure Access Service Edge.
Yes, very important for remote work.
But wait, in a post-pandemic world where the workforce is entirely distributed, logging in from coffee shops and home networks, doesn't SASE just create a massive bottleneck? I mean, you're routing all corporate traffic through a cloud security edge. If the SASE provider goes down, doesn't the entire global workforce go offline?
Well, you've identified the inherent risk of vendor consolidation, sure. But the alternative is trying to individually secure 10,000 different home Wi-Fi networks.
Which is mathematically impossible.
Exactly. SASE operates on the principle of identity-centric security. The network doesn't care if you're sitting in the corporate headquarters or a cafe in Madrid.
It just cares who you are.
Right. It constantly verifies your identity, the health of your device, and your behavioral patterns before granting you access to specific applications, not the entire network, just what you need for your job.
And for organizations that cannot afford to build out these massive custom AI-driven architectures, Lambert points to SOC as a service.
Because a real security operations center, a SOC, requires 247 staffing by highly paid analysts. It requires constant technology refreshes. It's financially unfeasible for mid-sized enterprises.
So SOC as a service allows them to outsource it.
Exactly. They stream their network telemetry to a centralized provider who uses advanced AI and massive economies of scale to monitor thousands of clients simultaneously. It provides real-time monitoring without the heavy infrastructure.
So we have this environment where offensive AI is battling defensive AI at light speed.
Machine against machine.
Yeah, but Lambert's most sobering insight, the absolute core of his philosophy here, is that despite these massive technological leaps, the paradigm of prevention is dead.
It is entirely dead. For decades, the philosophy of cybersecurity was perimeter defense, build the wall higher, buy a better firewall, block the attack.
Keep the bad guys out.
Right. But Lambert articulates that in 2026, the complexity of IT environments and the sophistication of attackers make perfect prevention a statistical impossibility.
So what's the new paradigm?
Managing the inevitability of the breach. It is no longer a question of if a threat actor will bypass the XDR or compromise the SEC, but when. And more importantly, how rapidly the organization can contain the blast radius and recover operations.
And the post-incident reality that these transcripts describe is just brutal. We touched on the extortion model with Nike, but Lambert specifically highlights triple extortion ransomware, which has apparently become the industry standard.
Yes, and the mechanics of triple extortion are designed to apply absolutely unbearable psychological and financial pressure on an organization.
Okay, what are the 3 layers?
First, they encrypt the local operating systems and databases, which immediately grinds all business operations to a halt.
You can't even turn on your computers.
Right. Second, they exfiltrate the most sensitive data, intellectual property, customer records, legal communications, and they threaten to dump it on the open internet, which would trigger massive regulatory fines.
And class action lawsuits.
Exactly. And then the third layer is the most aggressive: direct reputation blackmail.
How does that work?
The attackers will actively email the company's largest clients, their board members, and even the media. They'll say, "We have compromised this organization. Your personal data is at risk, and they are refusing to protect you by paying our ransom."
Oh, that's evil. They weaponize the company's own ecosystem against them.
Yes. And the transcripts cite a staggering statistic here. Despite all the advice from law enforcement, 60% of companies just pay the ransom.
Okay, I have to challenge that statistic for a second. From a pure, cold business calculus, if the ransom is $5 million, but the cost of rebuilding the entire IT infrastructure from scratch, paying regulatory fines, and suffering a month of downtime is $50 million.
I know what you're going to say.
Isn't paying the ransom the fiduciary responsibility of the executive board?
That is the exact logical trap the syndicates rely on. And Lambert makes it very clear why paying is a massive, catastrophic, systemic error.
Okay, explain why.
First, there is zero cryptographic guarantee that the decryption key they provide will actually work, or that it won't corrupt the entire database during the decryption process.
Right, you're trusting thieves.
Exactly. You are dealing with criminals. There's literally nothing stopping them from taking your $5 million, keeping a copy of your data anyway, and then extorting you again 6 months later.
Oh.
Furthermore, you are funding the research and development budget of a criminal enterprise.
You're subsidizing the next generation of polymorphic malware.
Precisely. But most critically, paying the ransom fundamentally changes your threat profile. The syndicates operate on shared intelligence networks. Once you pay, your organization is marked on dark web forums as a payer.
You paint a giant target on your own back.
Yes. You guarantee future attacks by different affiliates who now know your board will authorize cryptocurrency transfers under pressure.
So, if 60% are making the critical error of paying, what do the mature organizations do? What is the architecture of resilience for the 40% that survive without negotiating?
It requires a massive pivot from reactive panic to proactive resilience. Mature organizations operate under the assumption that they are already breached.
That's what they plan for.
They conduct exhaustive incident response plans, tabletop exercises where they simulate a triple extortion attack with the executive board, the legal counsel, and the PR teams.
So when the crisis actually hits, it's muscle memory.
Not panic, exactly. And they utilize deep forensic analysis architectures. When an attack happens, they don't just wipe the machines. They ask, why did this happen? They trace the attack vector to completely eradicate the persistence mechanisms.
And they also use that ultimate failsafe you mentioned earlier, immutable backups.
Yes. Immutable storage is the absolute silver bullet against encryption. These are backup architectures that at a hardware or deep software level cannot be altered, overwritten, or deleted by anyone, not even your own system's administrator.
For a set period of time, right?
Exactly. So if the ransomware syndicate encrypts the primary network, the organization can simply sever the connection, wipe the infected hardware, and restore from the immutable backup with minimal data loss.
You take away their leverage completely.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final and honestly the most frustrating reality outlined in these sources. We've just mapped out AI-driven correlation engines, zero-trust cloud architectures, SaaS, immutable hardware.
All this incredible technology.
Right. Yet the sources highlight a profound exhaustion in the industry. Because despite billions spent on technology, the initial vector of compromise is almost always human.
The weakest link.
Exactly. An employee ignores a warning, bypasses a security protocol, or falls for an AI-generated phishing lure because they are tired or distracted or operating under a false sense of urgency. The transcripts even mention people still using passwords like 123456.
It happens every day.
So my question is, if the human brain is the ultimate unpatchable vulnerability, how do we fix the humans without turning the corporate environment into this paranoid, suffocating surveillance state?
Lambert's synthesis here is vital. You cannot patch human psychology with a software update. You have to build a pervasive culture of security.
But what does that actually mean? For decades, security was treated as a punitive compliance exercise.
Oh yeah, a boring 45-minute video you watched during onboarding and then completely ignored.
Accompanied by an IT department that acted as the Department of No, just blocking access and slowing down productivity.
Right. But building a culture of security means integrating it into the frictionless flow of daily operations. The technology behind the scenes, the XDR, the SSE, must be incredibly complex, but the user experience has to be extremely simple and invisible.
Because if it's annoying, people will just find a workaround.
Exactly. If a security protocol requires an employee to take 5 extra steps just to share a PDF with a client, the employee will circumvent the protocol and use an unauthorized personal Dropbox account. Security must enable the business, not hinder it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, it requires shifting the psychological burden. Organizations must run continuous, customized phishing simulations.
Like fake attacks on their own employees.
Right. But crucially, when an employee fails and clicks the simulated link, it cannot be a punitive HR event where they get yelled at.
It shouldn't be about punishment.
No, it must be a gamified, immediate micro-learning moment. You transform the employee from a passive liability into an active human sensor network.
So you make security an integrated business strategy.
Exactly. You align HR, internal communications, and executive leadership to reward security vigilance.
So when an employee flags a highly sophisticated AI-generated spear phishing attempt targeting the finance department,
that employee should be publicly acknowledged and rewarded. Security ceases to be the exclusive domain of the IT basement and becomes a core shared metric of organizational health. The goal is to make every employee a part of the defense network.
You know, I want to challenge everyone listening to evaluate their own operational reality right now.
It's a good time to reflect.
Yeah. Look at your daily workflows. Are you operating under the assumption that your IT department's firewalls will just magically catch everything? Or do you actively participate in your organization's security culture?
Because security in 2026 is no longer a spectator sport.
No, it really isn't. It requires an uncomfortable baseline level of skepticism regarding all digital inputs.
Absolutely.
Let's pull all of these threads together because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We began by examining the deeply human analog trust networks forged at RutedCon, those informal alliances that are literally vital to combating automated threats.
The basement hackers growing up.
Right? Then we mapped the psychological and economic mechanics behind state-level data breaches, exploring how threat actors weaponize the media and exploit those tiny temporal gaps in IDOR vulnerabilities, like we saw with the Science Ministry.
Just changing a number in a URL.
Exactly. We analyzed the shift in the ransomware economy, moving from simple encryption to the high-stakes extortion of strategic intellectual property, like the 1.4 terabytes of data stolen from Nike.
Stealing the future, essentially.
And finally, we broke down Hervé Lambert's 2026 threat matrix, the reality of polymorphic AI, synthetic deepfakes, and the absolute imperative shift from attempting perfect prevention to mastering post-breach resilience.
Because the breach is inevitable. The landscape we have mapped today is defined by extreme velocity and complete asymmetry. The only viable path forward is an architecture of resilience supported by a vigilant, empowered human culture.
And I want to leave you with something to really process long after this deep dive ends. Something we haven't touched on yet, but that feels like the ultimate conclusion of all this.
What's that?
Well, if we extrapolate the trajectory of the 2026 matrix, we are approaching an asymptote where artificial intelligence perfectly, flawlessly mimics reality.
It's getting very close.
The deepfake video of a colleague is visually flawless. The synthetic voice on the phone has the exact cadence of your boss or your family member. The polymorphic code leaves absolutely no recognizable signature.
Right.
If the automated defense systems behind the scenes are forced to operate at speeds way beyond human comprehension just to counter these threats, we are effectively delegating all of our trust to machines.
We have to.
But if every digital input we receive can be perfectly fabricated, what happens to human intuition? In a future where we literally can't trust our digital eyes and ears, does building a culture of security eventually mean we have to stop trusting each other entirely?
Wow.
Does survival in the digital age eventually demand the complete suspension of human trust? It is a heavy thought, and one that redefines our relationship with the technology we rely on every single day.
That is a terrifying but very necessary question to ask.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the 2026 threat landscape. Stay curious out there, check your passwords, and verify everything.